Thank you so much all for being here to the inaugural event for All Rise, a UWGB Civil Liberties lecture series. My name is Nolan Bennett, if you don't know me, and I am an assistant professor and pre-law advisor here in Democracy and Justice Studies and Political Science. Now, along with Professor Elizabeth Wheat, we are so thrilled to start this series. And again, I really want to thank all of you for being here. Before I say anything else, though, on behalf of UWGB, I want to acknowledge the First Nations people who are the original inhabitants of the region. The Ho-Chunk Nation and the Menominee Nation are the original first people of Wisconsin, and both nations have ancient historical and spiritual connections to the land that our institution now resides upon. Today, Wisconsin is home to 12 First Nations communities, including the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, Forest County Potawatomi, Ojibwe Nation communities, Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohicans, and the Brothertown Indian Nation. And we acknowledge the First Nations people of Wisconsin. We'd also like to thank the Menard Center for the Study of Institutions and Innovation, who have sponsored this series. Their mission is to promote the study and discussion of civil liberties and related institutions and innovations through scholarly inquiry, educational activities, and community outreach. Now, to give you a bit of background, Professor Wheat and I have long wanted to develop a program just like this that connects our amazing community of students and scholars and staff to some of the sharpest and most insightful legal minds and actors in the field today. We are then so excited not only for this first inaugural event, but that we have this full lineup for the semester with a great speaker scheduled every month. So with that, then, let me turn things over to the real brains and brawn of the operation, Professor Wheat, who is going to introduce our wonderful speaker for tonight.
All right, thank you for the introduction on that as well. Tonight, our guest is Sabnam Lotfi. Sabnam is a UW-Madison Law School graduate and an attorney at Madison who specializes in immigration law and advocates for immigration reform. Sabnam also serves as a trustee on the Village of Shorewood Hills board and is on the board for the Wisconsin Conservation Voters. Sabnam will share a bit of her experiences and insight, and then we'll open the conversation for questions. Feel free to type your questions in the Q&A, and we will answer as many as we can get to tonight. And so, Sabnam, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate the introduction. I've had an opportunity to do some pretty cool stuff in my career. And so sometimes I think of the bio and I think like, well, who's that? Because that's not me. My goal today is to kind of give everyone a private viewing of all that goes on behind the scenes. I want to just share some stories and try to keep it entertaining. I think that we all like stories, but we don't like boring stories. So I hope my stories are not boring or long. And I think I realized in just preparing for this event that I'm not the smartest kid in town. I'm not the brilliant legal, scholar, but I had two things going for me throughout my career. One of them was perseverance, and the other was courage. So let me start with how I got into law school, because I think a lot of people are pre-law students here. I took the LSAT 5 times. That is not normal. And the first time I went to take the LSAT, I actually cried in the middle of the exam and I walked out. And I was so terrified. I really had high expectations and I wanted to know if the American dream is real or not. And if you worked your hardest, could you achieve anything? Is anything possible? So the first time I took the test, I walked out and I was living in New Jersey at the time. And I was working for a pharmaceutical company. I would study at night, and a friend of mine said, why don't you take Testmasters? There's an LSAT prep course company called Testmasters. They're really good. I signed up. I started studying. I also went to New York for a workshop because the CEO, the owner of the company, gave this workshop there. And he was incredible. Best teacher I ever had. Phenomenal workshop. I studied for the test. I took it again. but I was shooting for like 160s, 170s. I got to go to the best school ever. And when I took the test the second time, my score was in the mid 150s. It wasn't high enough for my goals and ambitions. So I thought, like, what am I going to do? Let me take the test again. I called test masters to sign up for the course. And while I was on the phone with the woman, I said to her, you know, that guy, Robin Singh, who taught, he was so good. Like, I wish he was my teacher. And she said, well, he does teach. He teaches in Los Angeles. I was like, well, that's not fair, because like those kids have an advantage over the rest of the country. This is just not fair. He's such a good teacher. And I got off the phone with the woman and I just thought, you know, what am I doing with myself? I really, 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 really want to get into law school. I want to get into a tier 1 school. I don't have the scores, but I'm going to take my parents out to dinner and convince them that I need to quit my job, move to LA, and take this class with this guy, because that's what I thought I needed to do to get into law school. And they said, you know, you're 20, you're in your mid 20s, you can do what you want to do. There's no magic in LA. There is no like magician out there for you. You just have to study hard. But they allowed me to do what I wanted to do. I moved to Los Angeles. I took his class. I studied for another year. My score kept going up, but it wasn't like as high as I wanted to get into like a school like UW. And you know, and the guy said, you know, you know the material, but when you sit down for this exam, your nerves get over you, your brain freezes, your hands start shaking. You're just a terrible test taker. I know you know the material, but I don't know how to calm your nerves. So I was like, okay, well, thank you very much. I took the test again and again. My score kept going up, but I never got as the magical scores that I was looking for. Meanwhile, I moved back to Philadelphia, and there are these law school forums that the deans of the schools go to. And I met the dean of University of Wisconsin Law School in New York. And I told him, like, I really, 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 really want to go to your school. I don't have a 4.0. I don't have your 180 LSAT score that you want. What do I have to do to get into your school? And he said, here's my email, here's my phone number, do the best you can, and focus on your personal statement. I was like, okay. So I went home, I spent 3 months working on that personal statement. And the reason is because I didn't have another card to play. I don't have anything else to prove my worth. So I will pour my heart and soul into these 2 pages. And I wrote in there that, like, I have seen war. I'm a person whose childhood was taken away from her. I never ever want somebody to experience what I've seen in life. And that's why I'm motivated to go to law school. That's why I want to be there. So I applied to 18 schools. I had tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 as backups. And I started getting rejection letters one after the other and telling my parents, like, sorry to have wasted your time and sorry to be a complete failure. I will find something else to make of myself. And then I think I'll never forget it. Never, ever, ever in my life. It was March 27th, 2007. I checked the mail, another rejection letter. I opened up the laptop and there was an email. And the email was from the University of Wisconsin saying, welcome to the class of 2008. And I bawled my eyes out and I was like, this is the happiest day of my life. I'm never, ever, ever, ever gonna forget this, because I wanted it. Like, perseverance was like 2 years of putting heart and soul into it. So it was the happiest day of my life, except then I packed my bags to go to law school. I go to law school and it didn't take long. I would say 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I thought, like, what am I doing here? This was the biggest mistake of my life. I sat in torts class right in the middle, front row. I made friends with the guy to the right, sitting to the right of me. And he was like, hey, I'm Levi. I went to Harvard. I was like, Jesus, okay. So let me turn and make friends with the girl to the left. And the girl to the left was like, I'm Bonnie, and I went to Yale. I'm like, I don't belong here. Like, these guys are all Ivy League students. I'm just like a public school person. I don't have lawyers in the family. Like, and there's this thing in law school where they say you got to be in the top 10% of your class. I'm like, well, how am I going to compete with these guys? So I really quickly started, like, self-esteem and confidence went down. But I remember telling myself, like, you gotta stop. You're never gonna survive if you're gonna allow this to scare you. You just compete with yourself. I'm gonna learn this material not to be at the top of the class, but because one day I will be a lawyer and somebody will knock on the door and they will have a question and you got to answer that question. So just tune all those people out, tune all those voices out, focus on getting good grades. So I did that. And so that's kind of like my story of how to get into law school. Um, so the first year finished, and then the hardest part was finances, because I was an out-of-state student, and my first year I took out a $50,000 loan, 35,000 for tuition, and I think like $15,000 just to live off of. And I'd made some friends with non-law students. There was a woman who was an international student, and she had come to the US to teach a foreign language. And I went one day to her office. It's in Van Nuys. It's the tallest building on campus. We had lunch. Her boss came in that day, said hi. I got to meet her boss. At the end of my first year, she had gone home, but got stuck abroad and couldn't come back. Like, she couldn't get a visa. She was stuck in security clearance or something like that. She couldn't come back. And then I remember everybody saying, if you get a TA position, they'll pay for your tuition. So I was like, I got to find that woman. I go to the Van Nuys building. I'm walking around. I'm meeting people. I saw a friend there. And then I get in the elevator. And on the way down, the woman who I had met was my friend's boss, got in the elevator with me. And I just was like, what do I do? This is an opportunity. I know you need a TA. I want that job. I need that tuition assistance. I'm not qualified, but what do I do? She doesn't know me. She looks so like professional, and I'm here in like pajamas and my sweatpants. This is not appropriate. And so I just, for that moment, was like, you need courage. Just get that courage, bring it out. And all of a sudden I said, hi, I think you need a TA. I'm available. I can teach Persian. And she said, send me an email. So I sent her an email, and she interviewed me, and then she gave me the job. And it was just a moment of opportunity that you just got to whip it out, otherwise you lose it. So I got the job. I was not qualified. And nobody knew. And I remember calling my mom, being like, Mom, I got this great opportunity. I don't know what I'm doing. You have to help me read the book 3 chapters ahead so that I know more than the students. And so that's what I did. I read 4 or 5 chapters ahead every night with my mom, just in case anybody read ahead, I could answer questions. And that really helped with tuition, but it was very hard. Like, it sounds romantic, but it was so hard to go to school and then leave the school, go teach. Then you have to grade papers, but then I have homework to do. And I think at the second year law school, I had to switch to part-time. Like, it's not possible. And I think by the 3rd year of law school, I got depressed. And the depression it was the walls of the world are closing in. I just felt like I'm not at the top of the class. I still needed student loans. And by this time, it's probably up to $100,000. I don't have friends. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have a job lined up. My parents, who are far away, think that I'm going to be this hotshot lawyer going to Wall Street. I can't even get anybody to get me a job. I can't tell them the truth. So I just fell into this whole depression of like, everything that I'm worried about is reality. It's like, it's legit. It's happened. You are a complete failure. And the way I handled it is I had to get out. I went abroad. I went to go see an aunt who was living abroad, and she took me out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and she took me on vacations, and she took me shopping, and she just filled my heart with joy and made me feel like I don't, you have worth. So I got out of depression, but I think that hitting rock bottom sometimes can be the biggest blessing in disguise. because it felt liberating then. I felt like, you know what, all my worries and fears of the world have happened and I'm still alive. And I'm not going to define myself on my title, my job, my anything like that. You shouldn't define yourself in a way where the whole world has control over you, that if you're not a lawyer, you're a nobody, that if you're not married, you're now a nobody. So that for me was a very liberating experience. I graduated law school. I got a job. I worked in child support. My boss and I didn't get along. I was the worst employee in the world. She was the worst boss in the world. We just had two similar personalities. And I think it took a year and a half before I quit, because I have this stubborn perseverance in me, like I can fix this, but it just wasn't fixable. We were polar opposite personalities. And I think a year and a half later, I just thought, let's just stop this. And I quit. Then I thought, well, what am I going to do with my life now? And my dad said, you should go into healthcare law. And I didn't want to do healthcare law. What happened is I had a lot of friends who were international students, and all of them had problems with green cards. They just had visa issues. Nobody had a divorce, nobody had a criminal issue, nobody had a real estate transaction. So I thought, well, why don't I set up shop, try this immigration thing out for 6 months or a year. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll quit. My dad's like, this is the worst decision of your life. Immigrants don't have money. You're going to be broke forever. You're not a real attorney. I'm like, well, thank you very much, but I'm not interested. He kept saying, you got to go into healthcare law. Obamacare just passed. It's booming. Everybody's going to need a healthcare attorney. So I just brushed that off, and I started working on my friends' cases. But I was too terrified, because nobody was hiring either. Nobody's hiring because nobody really wants an entry-level attorney with no experience. Every job for an immigration attorney, they wanted somebody with 1 year experience. So I was like, well, I'll work for a year on my own, so then I can get a job working for somebody else. And I was terrified of going to jail. And I was terrified of malpractice because I didn't know what I was doing. I emailed every immigration attorney in Madison saying, I need a mentor. I need somebody, and half of them didn't write back. And one of them did write back, but when I would send her an email, she never responded. So then I emailed my law professor, immigration law professor, who's like, well, you got to call Linda. She's retiring. She might want to take an intern under her wing and teach, pass on her life knowledge. I emailed Linda. She's like, well, what do you want from me? I'm like, I need a mentor. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to be sued. And she's like, okay, I'll be your mentor. What do you want? And I was like, well, I thought you were supposed to tell me what I should want from you. And I called my sister-in-law, and she said, listen, you're not a student anymore. You're in the professional world. You need to drive this. So articulate clearly, what do you want? And I said, okay, how about I propose to her, we meet once a month at Panera's, 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, and I will come, I will set up an agenda, and I will show you the 5 cases I'm working on, and I will just ask that you review them. And she said, okay, I'll do it. But the lesson I learned in that conversation with my sister-in-law is like, nobody's there. You need to drive this. You're the driver. Nobody else is. There's a point in life where you just have to take control. So she looked at my cases, she helped me out. My practice started growing, people started calling. And I just remember I realized things in that moment that we all live these lives where we're constantly measuring ourselves by our resume. And that you as a human being, or I as a human being, have so much more to contribute to the world than just what's on my resume. I could talk to clients. I could win their trust. I could empathize with them. These are all things that nobody puts it on their resume. I can't answer a question in 10 minutes on an exam, but I can work really hard to find the answer if you just give me unlimited amount of time to figure it out. So all of a sudden I started thinking like, my God, your resume has value, but you also have a whole lot of traits and talents that are not listed there. Of course, my dad kept calling and being like, "Are you okay?" Because now we have a 5-person law firm. We're growing, we're booming. And he still calls and says, like, "Do you need money?" I'm like, "Dad, I'm a celebrity. People call me from China. Could you please give me a little bit of acknowledgement that I have like succeeded in life?" Um, Sometimes you you just have, I don't know what to say about that. Parents are parents. So I set up shop. There was some law students who called, some graduates, they wanted jobs. I could use additional help. A couple people came on board. And then in 2017, Donald Trump became president. I have a very quick story for this, but it's not political related. So he becomes president, and the very first thing he does is he signs a Muslim ban. And I think there were a bunch of lawsuits that were filed. It was immediately struck down. He tried to sign it again. It had all sorts of problems. Hawaii sued. But then finally, about a year and a half later, the Supreme Court says that this ban is legal and that the president can do what he wants. And one of the clauses in that new travel ban was that if you had ties to the US, they would have an exception for you. If you were the spouse of an American citizen, if you were coming here for certain reasons, you would be exempt from that ban. In reality, what happened is that nobody was exempt from the ban. And all we saw every single day were like a whole bunch of cases getting denied. But this person should have got an exception because their husband was here, their children were here, their spouse was here. And nobody was doing anything about it. Like I called ACLU, I called a bunch of organizations, and they're like, "We have so many other problems." So I looked to Veronica, who works with me. I'm like, "Maybe we should sue." And she's like, "You're out of your mind. You want to go sue the president? You're out of your mind." And I was like, "Well, there's a lot of people that make mistakes in this world. What's the worst that could happen? We'll just get kicked out of court." And we filed the lawsuit saying that there's a waiver process and certain people should be exempt, and they're not being exempted. They're not getting the exemption. And as soon as we filed, I remember filing the case and just fingers are panicking. My heart is racing. What am I doing? I'm calling the president a liar on national television. I'm going up against the government who has unlimited resources, and I'm just a kid from Madison, Wisconsin. But as soon as we filed the case, you do something good in the world, a whole bunch of other good people will find you. So then we've got all these lawyers coming in from DC, California, New York saying, "We saw what you did, we want to help." Well, go right ahead. We could use all the help we need. We tried to pretend like we knew what we were doing, but they really quickly came on board and helped out. And through the experience of working with these incredible big league superstar attorneys, we have learned so much. And all it required was this little act of courage in a moment to do what you're so not qualified to do. But what do I have to lose? I'll get kicked out of court. That's fine. And we haven't. The case is still going on. We're still filing. And that's my last story, or it's my second to the last story, because I have one other story. I think the last story I was going to say is all this happened. At some point, I don't know if it was a year ago, I got an email from the UW Alumni Association, and they're always asking you to contribute to the university financially. I'm still paying student loans, so my contributions are not that much. But he offered me tickets to go to a basketball game and to sit in the chancellor's suite. And I'm like, well, I can't give that up. Oh my God, this is incredible. I'm telling my husband, look what kind of an email we got. And it was so cool. And we went and we made friends and we networked and we met people. But I remember, so then what happened is 6 months later, the same guy writes me an email and he says, "There's a day of action happening at the Capitol. Can you come support and speak to your legislators about funding for the university?" And I was like, well, he gave me free tickets. I really should return the favor. Let me go to this event, talk to my senator, talk to my representative, advocate for the university. And while I was there was another guy in the room who said to me, "I really like how you advocate. Like, you're really trying to convince the legislators that they got to support the university. Why don't you run for office? I was like, me run for office? Well, it's my childhood dream for sure, but nobody would vote for me. I mean, no, I don't even know anybody. I don't know anything about politics. But he's like, no, I see fire in you. You have passion. I see how you talk. You should give it a try. I'll get you a manager. We went out for lunch. He talked to me and he said, you should run. And I was like, okay. And I ran for state assembly. The cards were stacked against me from the beginning, but I knocked on doors all day long through the whole district. Best experience of my life. I lost. I came in second place. But once you run for a political position, then the whole city knows you. So my practice boomed and everybody started calling me because they knew I was an immigration attorney. And then when I lost the race, I got 4 phone calls the next day saying, come be on our board. So I was on the Wisconsin Conservation Board, and then I joined an immigration board. And then somebody said, well, you lost that race. Why don't you run for a trustee of the village of Shorewood Hills? And I won that race. I didn't campaign, but by that point, the whole city kind of knows you. It was a smaller seat in a smaller pond, and now I'm an elected official. That's kind of my whole story. I don't have any more stories to share, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope the moral is like, don't be intimidated. There's a world out there, there's a universe that is waiting for you to figure out what you're good at and to bring it. Because we need you to. The world is waiting for you. There's 1,000 problems that need somebody's attention.
Okay, thank you so much. That was fantastic. So I'll carry off the questions, and we'll kind of remind everyone, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A as well. So when I was preparing for tonight as well, one of the things that I was looking through, just background bio, things we've talked about in the past, and reading some of the really moving testimonials from clients and families that you served. And I will say, if you're ever having a really tough day, go back and read those, because one thing that really struck me was how the families really felt seen. They felt supported. They felt encouraged during really stressful times in their lives. And I'm kind of curious, what is your philosophy when you're approaching clients and dealing with them in really difficult and probably stressful situations? How do you approach that case and sort of build that relationship and navigate that legal minefield for them?
Yeah, that's a really great question. My parents fought every day of my life. They were constantly arguing left and right. And I feel like having seen terrible communication, it can turn into a blessing in disguise, and it can be a gift. Every time something terrible happens in your life, you're going to get, there's some silver lining there. So I think just having seen a lot of arguments, I can speak to my clients knowing that they're really upset and anxious and frustrated, and that you can't take anything personally. They're just in a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming to you because you're an attorney. You have this degree. They're coming to you for help. I think I'm an empathetic person, and empathy is very helpful to show people that you understand them. You know what they're going through, and you acknowledge their frustrations. And I think that's really important as a lawyer, because I think that's been maybe why we've been successful, is just showing people that we care and that we will fight for you as if you're it's my mom's case, it's my son's case, it's my husband's case on the line. I think being nice is really it. Just you gotta be nice. The job was never about money. Mm-hmm. The job was always about, I want to win and I want to be the person's hero. The money came later. The focus was always, I want to be a champion for this person.
All right, we have our first question from the audience, and it's a good one. Sal asks, any good news regarding immigration with Biden being president now?
Well, definitely. I mean, he came out swinging on the first day that he was elected, inaugurated. The Muslim ban was repealed that day. They want to, what I understand is they want to get rid of the 3 and 10-year bar, which are reasons why so many people cannot apply for green cards. They've just been here unlawfully, and there's no fix for it. You can't get the green card here. You can't leave and get it abroad. He tried to put a ban on ICE for 100 days. That got struck down. But we're very hopeful that there'll be a path for DACA to get citizenship or green cards. It's been very refreshing, very, very refreshing.
What are some of the obstacles that you've seen both to immigration in the US and also anything unique to immigrants that are coming to Wisconsin?
What are obstacles to getting to the US?
Based on some of the cases that you've seen, are there certain challenges that you're seeing people face both with either coming back to the US or getting their family members to the US? And is there anything different with Wisconsin specifically?
I mean, it really depends on the group of people, the community. So the Indian community, their biggest problem is that the system is designed so that only so many people of any one country can enter the US at a single time. And there are so many Indian nationals trying to come to the US, so that line through employment is backlogged. And it's backlogged at least by 10 years. So if you have a job offer from the US and a company wants to hire you, it will take over 10 years because you're an Indian national for that case to get processed. A problem for like Middle Eastern people is that once they get to the US, they got a single entry visa. And so they can only enter the US one time. If you go out, you got to get another visa to come in. It's not multiple entry. So many of these like Iranian students, they don't see their family for 10, 15 years. Once they enter, they know they can't get out. Other issues is for maybe everybody around the world, the delays. I think there was like 400,000 green cards that are waiting right now, and there's so many travel bans. You can't get somebody in USCIS to pick up the phone. You can't call the State Department. They won't respond to an email. So those are all issues that Biden has to clean up. There's the COVID bans. I could go on and on.
All right, we have another question from the audience from Rachel. Rachel asks, how important are the tiers of law school? It seems like there's so much pressure to get into a top tier school, but is it really as important as people make it out to be?
Well, I think it might depend on what you really want to do. I'm sure that there are certain firms on Wall Street where they are only going to take you if you go to Harvard. But if that's not the goal, to climb corporate America or to be in a certain league, then for me, no. I don't think the tier matters. How hard you work matters. I think going to a better school possibly opens up more doors. But there's plenty of people who go to any law school, and if you work hard, you network, it could be a harder battle that way, but it's not impossible.
We have another question from the audience asking, do you have plans to run for office again in the future? And what are long-term goals you're working towards in your career? Two-parter.
So it was definitely a childhood dream to be in Congress. But looking at Congress the way they function now, I just think like, do I really want that job? Do you really want to go there and just bicker with another party? And I've learned through litigation that you could be 1,000 times more effective. A single person can file a lawsuit and you can take down something that the president does. I don't know if I have the personality to be to be in Congress. I don't know if I schmooze enough. I don't know if I can tell people I'll solve all their problems and not mean it. I don't know if that's the right fit. I constantly think like, what am I good at? What can I offer? Is this good for me? I don't know if I want to. You're constantly checking your internal instincts and gut feeling to see if this is the right path. I guess if the door opened up, I wouldn't oppose it. But I don't think at the moment, with the way Congress is now, I don't think I'm interested.
Have another question here from an anonymous attendee. Are there other significant ways to work in immigration without necessarily being an immigration lawyer?
Well, I think a lot of firms are always looking for legal assistants, paralegals. You can be a translator. You can work at an NGO. You can be a foreign service officer and work at a US embassy abroad or a consulate. There's a whole bunch of nonprofits at the border that are looking for assistance. There are BIA representatives. There are certain states that allow you to not be a lawyer, and say you're not a lawyer and still represent someone. So I don't think you have to go to law school and be an immigration attorney for everything. You would if you want to litigate, but that might be the only thing that you're really barred from doing.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of cases over the years that you've been practicing. Is there a particular memorable story or a moment from one of those cases? Or you can pick a couple moments too if you can't decide on one.
Oh, I've got a ton of stories. I could tell you stories all night. There's a woman, she applied for citizenship 4 times. She kept getting rejected. She thought it was personal. They're discriminating against me. I learned that the first time she applied, she wasn't qualified. The second time she applied, she filled out the form wrong. The third time she should have got it approved, but I think the officer was mad about her previous denials and thought something fishy was going on. So we applied a 4th time for her and she did get approved, but there's tears coming down her eyes. And she was older. She was in her 60s and she had to learn English, and she had gone to English class for 4 years to pass that citizenship test. So she kissed my forehead, said, "I'll pray for you for the rest of my life. This is the biggest moment ever." And I remember driving back from Milwaukee just feeling like I was in heaven, that was the coolest thing in the world. Like, you got to take A to B and be that bridge in somebody's life. There was another woman who was trying to come to the US to see her son on a tourist visa. And for some reason, the officer, the border patrol at the airport, thought she was coming here to get married. So they're like, "You're committing misrepresentation. We're going to put fraud on your file and deport you." And the family had spent 5-10 years trying to figure out, like, how do we get her back? And I figured out a way. We filed the suit. It took 2 or 3 years to get approved. We said there was no fraud. She was married. She couldn't have come to the US to want to get married since she was already married. And so when we won that one, it was another one of those things where, wow, like 7 years, you haven't seen your kid. And all of a sudden, like, this wrong that you've been fighting for a decade is fixed. It's the coolest feeling in the world. And I think that's why in a lot of the litigation cases we have, these attorneys who are not immigration attorneys, and they don't litigate cases, but they're so bored with their jobs, they're looking for something fun and interesting and rewarding. So they're like, "Can I join a case with you?" Because they're just, it's I think the one area of law where it's not a financial transaction. We're not breaking up a house. We're not saying he gets this, she gets that. It's not corporate law. It's not a personal injury case where, again, it's about money. This really is about a person's life. And like whether they can live here or they have to leave the country. So the stakes are high. You really don't want to mess up. I'd rather lose somebody's money than to say you're never going to see your kid again. But so we are obsessive compulsive about our cases and double check and triple check everything because we know the stakes are high, but the reward is equally that high. The gratification you get from bringing a family together that hasn't seen each other for a while is like the coolest thing ever. Then they start sending you gifts and they want you to go to their wedding and they want you to be the godmother. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we have another question from Sal. What separates you and or your team from other immigration firms?
I don't know. I don't want to speak bad about anybody else. I think we pour our heart and soul into every case and that it's really not about money. And if there's so many times where, I'll tell you this case, I think I messed up once. The guy came to see me because he wanted to get on DACA. He'd come to the US, he was 9 months old, his parents brought him here. He had lived under the radar his entire life. And his high school or middle school counselor told him, you shouldn't bother with college because you're illegal and you're never going to get work authorizations. So just, this is not worth our time. Like, such a heartbreaking story. He's 30 years old. I realized that he had lived so much under the radar that there was no evidence he lived in the US and that we couldn't file for DACA because you have no proof you're here. But his mom had filed something for him like in 1995, which qualified him for the Life Act, meaning that if he paid this $1,000 penalty, we could reactivate that case from 1995 and he could get a green card. And even though the mom never got the green card, he would be grandfathered into the system. So I convinced him to trust me and do this. We go all the way to the interview. And for some reason, I misunderstood or had a different definition in my head of what it means to be grandfathered in. So they said, no, we can't give you the green card because your mom never got it. You're a derivative of her case. Sorry. And I was devastated and heartbroken because I convinced him to trust me. But he was married to an American citizen. So I said, let's do this. We're going to reapply, except this time using your American citizen spouse as the petitioner. And I told him I will pay the $1,000 penalty. And I did, because I wanted to own up to my mistake. And now he got his green card like a month ago. Happiest day ever. But I think what probably does differentiate us is that if I mess up, I feel too horrible that I feel like I have to fix it. And so if there is a fault that's my fault, I pay for it.
So I was thinking when you were telling the LSAT story in the very beginning, the year I was studying for the LSAT was the year Legally Blonde came out. So you have the big scene. She's like 179. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I mean, it's not a documentary, but I was thinking because I didn't test well either. And so it was funny that interestingly enough, Legally Blonde, the DC version came out the summer I was interning in DC. And I was like, Reese Witherspoon, come on now. Like, you're not giving me this accurate view of law school and life in DC because you've fallen short twice. So I'm kind of curious if you like these kind of like, moderately trash law movies that are kind of fun. And if so, what is your favorite loose legal law inspired movie or TV show?
I don't know if I have one. Because I don't think I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies. I don't know. I think what got me as a kid loving law was Perry Mason and My Cousin Vinny.
Yes.
But then there's now all these shows with Law and Order, and I liked House of Cards, which is politics related. But I don't think I've seen other law related movies.
They make it seem so easy. You're like, oh, you just go, you sit down, write some words, walk into a courtroom in a cute suit and win. Like, it's not exactly how that goes.
So I'll jump in here with a question of my own, if that's okay. So among legal academics and activists, it's become kind of near consensus at this point that immigration law and immigration broadly has become criminalized over the last few decades through a variety of changes. One of the awkward words we use to talk about this is crimmigration. And I'm just kind of curious, if that's something you've witnessed in your own practice. Examples, whether it's in the laws that are on the books, the processes facing folks, the behaviors of judges or prosecutors or administrators. Does that ring true for you in your experience of the law?
Yeah, I think the worst part about immigration is that the teeniest, tiniest, littlest mistake has the most severe consequences. So, a friend of mine was an international student teacher at UW. Her boss tells her, sign this form. We need you to go to this other university and like do an evaluation of their program. It'll be a 1-day job and they'll pay you $500 for it. So she does, and then she realizes that the form she signed is an I-9 form and that she marked she was a US citizen. And that now you have committed fraud, you have falsely claimed you're a US citizen, and you can be deported and denied US a green card for the rest of your life with no way to cure it. And so she goes through anxiety and depression, and then she needs a therapist, and then she takes the form, she gets a copy of it, she shreds it, and is, yeah, it's not fair. It was your boss told you to sign a form, you signed it, it was an honest mistake. This happens all the time. Maybe more 5-10 years ago, people would go to the DMV to get a driver's license, but then the DMV, because they had this push to get everybody registered to vote, was asking everybody, do you want to register to vote? Well, if you're a green card holder, you're not allowed to register to vote, and by registering to vote, you're saying you're a US citizen. There's no fix for it. So I always see the clients when we're going to go for citizenship, they've gone through 2 years of therapy, and they don't think they're a criminal, but they're being treated like a criminal. There's this like awful thing of, I'm not a criminal, somebody believe me. There's a lot of little things where you made a tiny error and all of a sudden it costs you so much. I think it's, yeah, if the system puts a really high standard for immigrants, and almost too high. Yeah.
That actually leads us really well into the next audience question. What do you think is the future of immigration law, and how do you see that changing over time?
Future of immigration law? Your guess is as good as mine. The system changes so slowly. I would hope that certain other features would be more automated, because right now, if you want to file for a green card, we're filling out a whole bunch of forms on paper and attaching all this on paper and then shipping it across the country, and then they're shipping it across the country. Why can't this be a little bit, use some technology, and you don't have this paper system that you're sending all over the US? So I think a little bit more automation would be really, really nice. But as far as changes in the law, I'm not sure. I don't know if this Congress will allow any change.
So we're very fortunate to have a lot of students who are interested in immigration, especially immigration law. And but a question for folks, of course, is always, do I stay, pursue a law degree here and practice in Wisconsin? And immigration law is, of course, interesting because it's federal in nature, but is greatly different based on the populations you're serving demographically throughout the US, the state, the county, so on and so forth. So what is distinct about practicing immigration law in Wisconsin, and how might it be different if you were practicing on the southern border, in the Southwest, in DC? Are there big differences in terms of your work in Wisconsin?
Not really, actually, because we do have clients from Wisconsin, all over the US, all over the world. It's the exact same system, regardless of where you are. I think what makes a difference is the part of immigration you want to work in. If you're going to do removal or deportation proceedings, the closest court to Madison is Chicago. So if you're going to do removal, you're going to be in court a lot. But if you're not, if you're doing employment-based cases, you could not even be in the US. I have friends who are practicing US immigration law and they live in Canada or they live in London. Everything is done, some of the stuff is done online or through mail. Maybe the judges are different, because I think John Oliver did a video where he said if you lived in Atlanta and practiced immigration law, maybe like 10% of those cases were going to get approved. But if you were in San Francisco, 50% of those cases are going to get approved. So some parts of the country, the immigration courts are a lot harder to win. That's another thing that's wrong with the courts, is that the judges are usually selected because they were previously a US attorney defending the government for immigration deportations. So there's a skew of people that become immigration judges. And I think for asylum, we all know like 9 out of 10 cases are going to get denied. Whereas if you had an ordinary person look at that case, they'd have a very different perspective than somebody who does that all day long and is kind of tainted. I think federal judges will have a lot more understanding than some of the immigration judges who they're just deporting everybody.
I'm curious if you could share a little bit about how you got your practice, like your own practice started, sort of the striking out on your own, what challenges, what surprised you with that, and just how did it get going?
Well, my dad gave me a loan that I never repaid. He gave me $4,000. I got a 100 square foot office space in the Regis building in Middleton. I had a laptop and a printer. And my goal was to see how long I could keep this $4,000 without going broke. I remember filing my taxes the first year and thinking I could have made more in McDonald's. It was hard. And I do remember the first guy that called me was in a panic and was saying, I heard I got to call an immigration attorney. Are you taking cases? I remember thinking, yes, I am. But my goal was I just wanted to get one case a month to survive. And that I told myself, if it doesn't work out in 6 months, I'll do something else. And I think it was probably at the 6 month or 1 year mark where just before I wanted to quit, it all of a sudden started making sense and I understood what I was doing and more people started calling, and that shifted me back into it. There's one thing I forgot to mention, and I think it's important for like women, because I think a lot of women have, I don't know, I did certainly, I thought I had to get married by 30, I had to have kids, and those factors were keeping me from applying to my fullest potential. And my new opinion about pregnancy and having a family is that you don't tell anybody. And when you deliver a baby, you just tell your boss, I'll be gone for 3 months and I'll be back. But I think research shows that women are always holding themselves back, thinking that, well, I can't take on this new promotion because I might have a kid. You don't even have a kid yet. He's not even born. You go 150% full potential and apply for every promotion out there. And the day before you deliver, you say, I'll just be right back real quick. But do not stop yourself for those reasons at all. And yeah.
Okay, I have one final question. So just to connect a couple threads. Earlier, you gave this rousing, awesome defense of empathy and being nice in the service of the work you do, and that's clearly been an essential source as well of your courage. And on the other hand, you've in response to my last question, kind of alluded to working through immigration law, you're faced with these like judges, these administrators, these folks who are like looking for every little kind of small potential problem. Do you think one of the issues with immigration law as it's practiced today is that it kind of encourages this like lack of empathy on one side, whether folks who are appointed as judges get in for the right reason or not. Like, is there sort of a potential solution through kind of thinking of the empathy we need among all legal actors, whether it's their job to review cases or not? Is there something there?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I think when it comes to interacting with the clients, they want to know you know what you're doing, you're competent, you have a plan, and that you care. So empathy matters there. I think that empathy is not the best card to play in an immigration court. And it's a more dry area, and I would rather rely on law and fact and convince the person that way, because I'm sure they've heard 100 sob stories, and I don't think a sob story is going to work right now. So my goal there is to give the judge a legal path that he could use to get the outcome that I'm looking for, and to sprinkle in empathy where I need it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful.
There's several thank yous in the Q&A, so I wanted to pass those on. Amanda says, thank you for an insightful and inspiring lecture. And I think that's a great note for us to end on. So thank you so much for joining us for the series kickoff, and for sharing so much about your experience and work tonight. And hope to see everyone here again next month for our second installment.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all.